morning, morning, morning. Good morning. Good morning to you.
Wonderful to have joining us this morning once again Cheryl Outram and Latoya Thomas. Cheryl is principal, Latoya is tutor, and they're with Life Lessons Academy and Preschool. Good morning, ladies.
Good morning.
Good
I
morning.
hope you had a great week so far.
Yes, we
please.
did.
Yeah, that's good
Yeah.
stuff. Now, we started last week talking about 14 tips for successful learning, and we were only really able to make it to maybe nine of them.
Yeah.
Yes, so it's time for us to go beyond that. First of all, what would you deem successful learning?
Okay. I would say successful learning is where the student is able to maximize their potential. So it looks different for every student. There's no one size fits all, but certainly when a student is successful at their learning, they have been given all the tools, all the resources. You know, there's nothing has been left out as far as helping that child to maximize their potential. Understanding that child, understanding how the child learns and so on. I think that is important to successful learning. Yeah, I think that's it.
No, for you, Latoya, and I don't ask this question to point fingers at teachers, and it really is not from a negative place, but maybe for people to come to a place of realization, if that is what we can do. Do you think there are a lot of teachers out there who view success in that way, in the way that it really is an individual thing, that we don't have this one size fits all that you talked about, particularly in larger classes? You have a class of 30 children and you're trying to get through a syllabus and everybody won't go at the same pace. Are teachers really able to or willing to take that into consideration to make sure that children are being the success stories on an individual basis?
Well, I would say not all, because sometimes, you would have different students learn at different pace, as you basically say. So if the teacher really has the interest of the student body, you can, if you see their challenges, you can, after class, you can, speak to the child, one-on-one to ask if they need extra help or so on. So it all depends on the individual that is teaching the student.
Principal Outram?
I would say our learning environment really creates a lot of struggle in that area, because our system is such that, once children come into the, let's say, the primary setting, there's not a lot of assessment to really separate children or to be able to identify, where children fall. So you have a system then where all children they're taught alike, they're tested alike, and so on. So there's that from the get-go. There's that one size fits all. I don't think that enough is being done yet to identify learning disorders. There are a lot of children who are struggling with ADHD, dyslexia, different disorders, and they don't know. Thus, there are many adults who are struggling with it as well, because if a child has ADHD, the probability is that one parent or both parents also has it. So if the adults themselves are not even aware, then how much more the children? So
yeah, I only started to think I probably have ADHD once I started learning more about it. But most certainly that did not exist when I went to school.
Yeah.
You were just restless, talkative, hard ears, or a good child. Those were the
categories.
options.
Yes.
So there was nothing more. Now, tip number 10, and the first one we're going to share today, is the slogan of your academy. Learning is a lifelong journey, not an event.
Yeah, that one is very important, because oftentimes, especially at the primary level, well, even before you do primary, when children begin learning, if persons are more aware, especially mothers and fathers, that children begin learning from the womb, it's a journey. I think oftentimes we focus on the school, when the child gets into school. But no, when the child is in the womb, you're also preparing that child for learning. That child is also learning. That child is learning things about discipline. The child is learning, let's say, circadian rhythm, how that mother is functioning while she's pregnant, when that mother is sleeping, when that mother is awake, the noise levels in the environment. All that the child is learning. So stress, trauma, the child is learning it. So when the child comes into the world, the child has already been exposed to certain things. So understanding where learning really begins. Yeah. So after that, you have the introduction to, nursery, daycare, nursery, preschool, primary school, and so on. It's a journey. Each of those are parts of the journey. And I think oftentimes parents think about, especially in our environment, the primary school and the common entrance exam. And they don't put in the child's mind the entire journey. So you're starting here, and this is where your learning ends. And just like we say with reading, a person who ceases to read ceases to exist. You're basically dead if you're not reading. And if you stop learning, the same thing happens, because things are changing. Let's say in the area of technology, things are changing, every nanosecond. So if you are not aware of what's happening, if you're not keeping abreast, you have a whole world that's changing around you that you really cannot function in. So similarly, I think that we have to broaden our scope as far as the learning journey, recognize that it doesn't even stop at university, because there are persons who are not, academically inclined. They may be skilled persons. That's not the only type of learning. You are learning all the time. You're learning in different ways. You're learning, whether you're doing a skill, you're on the job, seniors, you're learning. But let's say you're not in a learning environment, but you are now a senior. You now have to learn about the new you. You now have to learn about your body. You now have to learn about the adjustments that you need to make. So learning, there are lots of learning outside the academic environment that sometimes we don't take in. So parents then skew the whole expectation. Children then see learning as something that you turn on and turn off, and this is what learning is about. So they don't enjoy their learning. They don't see it as natural as breathing, because the picture put to them is that, when you're go read a book, learning is also punishment. That there are a lot of negatives that are associated with learning that we can remove if we are more aware.
Latoya, what are your thoughts on informal ways of learning? Because we, as you mentioned, we talk a lot about sitting in the classroom and having that structured presentation as a lesson. But there's so many other ways that people can learn. Do you think parents are open to all those other ways and consider them learning in the way that they would applaud the children for doing well in other areas? So I'm going to give you an example that might be a little controversial, maybe not so much now, but video games, for example.
Yes.
Now there's quite a market out there for gaming.
Yes.
So there are children who, if they excel at doing well at video games or playing online, I mean, you can't touch them. They know so well. That's not necessarily something that's awarded or as parents see as, something they've learned. So, how do you think parents are reacting to those unconventional things, the way children are able to navigate technology, for example?
Well, I am guilty of that, because my daughter...
Confession is good for the soul.
Well, from time she was like 2, there's the leapfrog games. They have, the educational things. They also have the play, so it helps develop their mind, as a way of thinking, because like some of the games, yes, they're, some of them could be a little violent, but there are also some that, it makes them think, like how to pass it, and it gives them the creativity, to excel at doing certain things. My brother, he wasn't, academically there. He went to Alma Paris, but with games and everything, like learning them and being on the computer, it helped develop him as well. Like if there's not a computer he can't pick down or to do our video game or whatever the case is or fix it. So sometimes giving them the game sometimes can be good, and depends on how they do, and sometimes it's just like a recreation for them as well too, because can't give work all the time. You gotta give them some time to relax and to find yourself as well too.
Yeah, I think that's been one of our shortcomings in thinking that people aren't good at academics because they can't necessarily sit down and write a paper, or they won't excel at mathematics, or you can't get them to do a traditional English paper or what have you, because all that you described is a way of learning that says that you have the capacity
Correct, to learn.
And if you're able to do that much with technology, pick down any computer, then that says to me in great measure that you are smarter than anybody can possibly imagine.
Yes.
Which segues into your next tenet, which is feedback and the importance of feedback.
Feedback is critical. No, this one says feedback is critical whether it is right or wrong. Encourage student engagement in the classroom. And this follows what you were saying just now as well. In the age in Barbados where we're talking about educational reform, the idea of academics being juxtaposed against skills is one where students who are not, academically inclined, who can't read well and so on, and go into the skilled areas in the school, those students, the first thing is that those students are made to feel that they are less than.
Who can't read well in the way it's taught.
The way it's taught. The persons who are the mechanics, who are the hairdressers, and who are going into those forms, there's a message that's being sent that you are not as smart. However, the plumber, the carpenter, however, those are the persons who, when they come out into society, make more money sometimes than you and I.
But, I'm not going to argue with that, because I have a mason who works at my house, and sometimes when he works, so what needs to be done, I can't figure it out.
Right.
So,
exactly.
And that calls for a lot
and so on.
That calls for a lot of math in terms of how you're able to keep my wall straight and get this built and so on. So it calls for the way we look at delivering education to change in great measure.
So the feedback part of it is that regardless of where a student's coming from, the feedback is critical. We use the feedback to assess where the child is at. So oftentimes parents stress whether the child gets it right or wrong. That's not important. When you create an environment where feedback can be given, you as a teacher can gauge what the child understands, what the child doesn't understand, and so on. So take away the pressure of it being right or wrong, and children will be more, engaging, because they're not now thinking about, oh, if I get it wrong, I'm going to be laughed at and so on. No, the important thing is that you get that feedback, because from hearing that child, you can then understand how that child is thinking, or even the adult. I've had many situations where I've been teaching adults, and it is when that adult speaks back to me that I recognize, oh, they're seeing something totally different. A quick example, I was teaching IT to seniors, and I was teaching them how to do their email addresses. And as they set up their email address and the passwords, and I was at the stage where they had to log in. And I showed them the boxes to enter the email address, and then the box to put in the password. And right under the box with the password says, forgot your password. And one adult, I saw her just stalling and not doing anything. And when I went to her and I was saying, well, okay, you can go ahead. She said to me, the computer said, forgot your password.
Yeah.
The way she perceived it, the way she interpreted it was totally different. Yeah. And for me, that was new as a teacher, because then it reminded me always that as a teacher, I have to stand in the student's shoes. I have to be able to see it from their perspective if I'm really going to understand what they are learning. Happens also in churches. We preach, preach, preach. And then at the end, we assume that the congregation's interpretation is what we are preaching. I heard a gentleman say that he thought the verse surely goodness and mercy shall follow me. He thought it was surely goodness and mercy.
People. Yeah.
Yeah.
That one, apples and oranges, though. You see this last one here? The gentleman at the church, he should have asked a question. Yeah.
Yeah. But he couldn't ask because that's what he heard.
I get the point. Even before we move past, and we still won't even get past these ones this week. But, you know, even before we get past the feedback, I think it's important for people to understand that it is equally as important to consider how they deliver this feedback.
Yes.
Whether negative or positive, and then for people who are on the receiving end.
Yes.
Many of us don't know how to receive feedback that we might consider to be negative, whether it's constructive or not. And there are lots of us who don't know how to deliver feedback. And that can make the difference in whether somebody wants to continue on to learn, or particularly if we're speaking about children.
Yeah. And adults.
Yeah.
And adults.
Yeah,
because
so that's
adults are just as sensitive. I love to bring parents into the learning environment because the pressure that they put on children when adults come into the learning environment, they are just as shy. They don't want to speak. Bring them into a parent-teachers meeting and you'll see very few parents are willing to engage. But those are the same parents who would beat their children for not talking, for not speaking, for not doing homework and so on, right? Many times they ask them, so when last did you read? They're not reading. They're not doing any form of math or anything like that. But they see themselves as, you know, the person with the whip who has to make the child do it.
And finally for today, develop listening, communication, confidence, reasoning, and creative skills in the child. That is a mouthful.
Yes.
So we're talking about communication leading to confidence and reasoning.
Right. These are all important. Listening is a skill. Oftentimes students don't know how to listen. The art of listening is one where if a teacher is instructing you, you have to clear your mind. Oftentimes people think they're listening, but they're actually listening to respond rather than to understand. And that hinders learning. Communication and confidence, the environment must be such that fear is removed from that environment. Oftentimes parents transfer a lot of fear to children without realizing they're transferring fear. Because if you're bringing the child to a learning environment and you've already communicated to the child that you should be afraid because the teacher might be a predator, you know, you're communicating a lot of things by your body language. You know, don't let me put you out of the car, you know, stay with me. Or sometimes parents want to come into the classroom and sit in the classroom with the children.
I want to come in the classroom and sit. That's not necessarily always a bad thing. And what I have found sometimes with some of the public schools is they're not as welcoming for parents to come into the classroom and to be involved in learning. And we know that children do better when parents are intimately involved.
Right.
So that might be something to consider. I think it might be numbers or what have you, not casting indictment, because my child goes to a public school and I find that they're open, but listening to some other parents from some other schools, you know, they talk about not having that level of engagement. They would like, thank you ladies for coming in. We managed to get through 3 today, so we have 3 more to wrap up this session, talking about tips for successful learning. To recap, learning is a lifelong journey, not an event. Feedback is critical, so it's not about being right or wrong, but you should give feedback and encourage your students in the classroom, outside of the classrooms if you're a parent, and develop listening, communication, confidence, reasoning, and creative skills in your child. Homework until next week.
Yes, please.
All right, so thank you for coming in.
Thank you for having us.
Good stuff.
Morning, morning, morning. Good morning.